Hello and welcome back to my Dandelion Diaries. I wanted to share with you guys the pens and inks that I have been using in January so far. And unlike doing this at the beginning of the month like I normally like to, I am actually doing this in the middle, and this is just because when I have time to do it. So I hope to do this earlier in the month for future months, but I wanted to show you guys the pens, the inks, and then I also want to do almost like a swatch of the inks to see what they look like wet, then dry, and move forward with that. So since we are in January, my plan is to do a full swatch of all of the inks on this page and then dedicate one page each to the ink and maybe do like a little writing sample with the pen that I used obviously for this month. This is my Hobonichi 𝗦𝗫𝗍𝗍𝗍 planner Techo, the honed version in the Emma and Georgina, and then it is the new Sans and Tomoe River paper, so I'm interested to see how it behaves on this versus the normal paper that I use, which is the old old Tomoe River paper for my other swatches. So we shall see how this turns out, but I'm excited, and we're just going to jump straight in with my very first pen, and that one is going to be my TWISBI Eco Creme with an extra fine nib. So this was recently released. This is one of my newer pens, and this is my first time inking it up, and I'm really happy with the choice that I made. And I inked up this TWISBI with Wearingeul's Jane Eyre, which is a nice light purple ink. So for Jane Eyre, this is what the bottle looks like. I was graciously gifted this by Lisa, so thank you, Lisa. She heard how much I enjoyed my samples of this one and thought this ink could use a better home, and I'm so glad to have it because it will definitely get used by me. So what I'm going to do is basically do a little swatch of this, and I'm going to use my little acrylic stamp block to do the swatches for these. And one thing that I really like about this ink in particular is its shading, which I know I've showed in one of my other videos, the shading that it has on the original Tomoe River paper. With the Sanzen, I feel like it doesn't grasp the darker shades of this very well, which is a little disappointing, but at the same time, I feel like the color of this is a little bit warmer on the Sanzen paper. I don't know why that is because they're both white, and usually if you use like a more creamy paper, then it makes the ink a little bit warmer toned. But I feel like with this one, I'm really happy with it still, and it's doing really well. After using this ink for about half a month so far in this specific pen, I find it to be a little bit dry, and the shading is not where I want it to be. I know I put this in an extra fine nib and it would do very, very well in a medium nib, but I figured with the TWISBIs typically being a little bit bolder for their nib size, it would still do okay. And it did. It does have a little bit of shading, but it doesn't have the depth that I was hoping for. The next pen that I had inked up is my Kaweco Sport in Macchiato, and this one, it has a fine nibbed pen, and I inked it up with J. Herbin's 𝗦𝗬𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍. For the ink itself, I just have a very small bottle of the 𝗦𝗬𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍. This is what it looks like. It's one of their 10 ml bottles. I find that I don't go through the Herbin inks very well because I find them a bit dry, but I will say the shading and the colors of most of them are quite beautiful, and I do enjoy writing with them with pens that can handle a drier ink. One thing I have found with this specific combination of the Kaweco Sport and the 𝗦𝗬𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗍 is that it is still a dry writer, but the fine nib of the Kaweco Sport shows the shading of this stunningly. It shows the depth of the color from the darks to the lights, and it did a really good job, even though it is a fine nibbed pen. I really love the color of this ink. I really love the shading in this ink. I think it could use a little bit of like something like a White Lightning from Vanessa to maybe make it a little bit more wet, but I personally like to use the inks as they are and not alter them. If I didn't have other browns in my collection that I liked that were better consistency, I probably would add that to this one. It's just, I like to test things out how they come versus changing things up as I go. The next pen I have inked up is one of my Jinhao 82s. This is, I believe, called Fluorescent Coffee. These little pens are fantastic and very, very inexpensive. I have this inked with Ferris Press Plaited Gold Tress, and this is in a medium nib. This ink by Ferris Press is one of their newer releases. I believe it was for either November or December of 2023, and it is a nice warm buttery yellow color, and I felt it would pair well with this pen just because of the gold glitter in the pen, but I have some thoughts. Before I share those thoughts, this is what the ink bottle looks like. I also have the box. Ferris Press is known for having a very decorative box with the properties listed on the side, at least for their fairy tales collection. So before I swatch it, you can maybe see that it says the base is yellow, the sheen is an A, the shimmer is a gold green, and the shading is high. And then the box itself has these beautiful, almost like the plaits or the braids, like of Rapunzel. Very beautiful artwork. I do enjoy their boxes, and I do like to keep the boxes if I do get a bottle of the Ferris Press ink, just because I find them very pretty. You might be able to see the shimmer on the bottom of this one if I rotate the bottle, being kind of like a gold, and it does have almost a lime green shimmer to it as well. I'm going to give this a good shake, and then I'm going to do the swatch. Okay, now for those thoughts I was talking about. So this ink is a beautiful, warm, buttery yellow color. I was actually very drawn to it because this is the type of yellow I typically go for. And since it claimed to have a high shading, I had really high hopes for it. It does have high shading, and it is legible to me, almost. So I feel like if I had put this in a broad nibbed pen, we would have been 100% golden, literally. But with the medium nib of this Jinhao 82, it was a little too light in some areas for me to get a good glimpse of what I was writing. I will say the shimmer in this is stunning, especially when it behaves well in the pen. I didn't have any problems with getting consistent shimmer in the beginning when the cartridge I put it, or the converter I put in was full. As it got emptier and emptier, I was struggling to get the shimmer to show up. And I think it's just because maybe I had used all of it up in the original writing I was doing with it. But the shimmer did show really well, and it was really consistent in most of the writing for almost the whole pen usage. I will say I have other yellows that I like more than this, but if you like Ferris Press as a brand and you like their inks, this is a very nice yellow color, and I would be happy to have it in my collection if I didn't already have it. The next pen I had inked up is my Ferris Press brush fountain pen in the Majestic Maple colorway. I have mixed feelings about this pen after using it a few times now. The nib I got is the medium nib, and the whole unit would have to be changed out if I want to use this in a different nib size, which is mildly frustrating. But I will say the sleek design of this is really pretty. It's really nice in the hand. It has a good weight, but I'll talk about the ink combination and we'll see how I feel with this. So the ink that I chose to pair this pen with was one of the new ones gifted to me by Priscilla, and it is the Birmingham Penco Ambered Adobe. And I really wanted to have a nice kind of corally orange color for my color scheme that I'm going for. And I figured I'm going to try out this brand of inks because they've been really good and juicy in all of the other things I've tried it in. Let me put it in a dry writing pen like the Ferris Press pen. And I have to say I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed, and I'll show after I write with after I show the ink in the big swatch. So the color of this ink is gorgeous. It's like a orangey red pink. It has shading. I've talked about Birmingham Penco inks now a few times. My last ink swatch video was actually of more Birmingham Penco inks, and I love the shading that they possess. So I was hoping with the medium nib of the Ferris Press pen that I would get some of that shading to show up. I'm disappointed. I feel like the dryness of the nib in the Ferris Press pen just counteracted completely any juiciness that came from this ink. I was honestly a little sad. I will say it did have better flow than if I'd used this pen with, say, like the Herbin ink or even the Wearingeul ink, but I was still really disappointed with the amount of shading that I was hoping to get versus what I actually got. Don't think I would ink these together again, honestly think that the Ferris Press pens need really juicy inks, like maybe even the Pilot inks now. I've struggled with a lot of the different inks that I've put in this, and I'm struggling still. I was really hopeful that the BPC inks were going to be a good match for this pen. The next pen I decided to ink up for the first month of 2024 is probably one of my oldest pens and one of the pens I started with. And this is a gold Pilot Metropolitan, and it has a fine nib. I absolutely adored these pens when I first got started. They were my first introduction really to fountain pens because they were recommended by so many to be a great starter pen. And I have to say, I still enjoy them, but I enjoy other pens much more. But I like the look of them just being as sleek and as simple as they are with the ones that I have. I decided to ink this fountain pen up with one of the inks from the Diamine Inkvent collection, and that one is Cashmere Rose. It was one of my top 10 for sure from the whole collection, and I really wanted to use it in a pen as soon as possible just to see how the shading would behave in a fine nibbed pen specifically. Here is the teeny tiny bottle of Cashmere Rose that I have, since this was from the latest Inkvent from Diamine. They have not released the full bottles of these yet. I don't know when, probably usually in the summer, I think. But when they do, I will likely pick up a full bottle of this one because I really, really enjoyed the shading of it 100%. So with this pen and ink combination, like I said, I was really wanting to see how the fine nib would do with the shading from Cashmere Rose. And I have to say, fine nibs from Pilot are probably my favorite fine nibs for fine writing or writing really tiny. I don't really like the extra fine nibs on a lot of pens because they're really scratchy to me. So I typically stick with fine and above, unless it's a TWISBI, in which case I'll get the extra fine because usually it writes like a fine anyways. But with this specific combination, the fine nib of the Pilot showed a very minor amount of the Cashmere Rose shading, and I was kind of like, okay, fine. I wasn't super over the moon with it, but I still loved writing with this color. This color is so, it's just like a hug, like, or I don't know, it's got like a warmness to it. I feel like Cashmere Rose is such a good naming for this just because of how inviting it is. I'm hoping later on when I get to put it in maybe like a medium or even a stub nib, this would look absolutely stunning, but we shall see if I even ink it up again this year or if I save it for, I don't know, next year or something. The second to last pen that I inked up for January of 2024 is my favorite Esterbroook Estie, and this is in the Tortoise colorway with the gold trim. This has a fine nib on it, and I absolutely love the Esterbroook fine nib. I think it's my favorite nib size, honestly, from Esterbroook, and I may just buy the nib units and change out some of the other ones that I have that I'm not a huge fan of, but I really enjoy this pen. The ink that I decided to pair with this Esterbroook this time around is actually a new ink to me, courtesy of Allison. So thank you, Allison. She was kind enough to swap inks with me and sent me this Dominant Industries Natural Green. It is a shimmer ink. It is a beautiful color, and I cannot wait to show you the big swatch of this one. This ink has the most forest leafy green color I have ever experienced. I absolutely have enjoyed this ink immensely this month. Honestly, this is my number 2 of writers this month just because it has been so much fun to write with. It's a gorgeous color, as you've probably known if you've been following my channel. I love green ink, and this one is no exception. It honestly behaves so beautifully with the fine nib of this Estie. I love the way this Estie writes. Like I said, it's my favorite Estie nib. This combination was chef's kiss, like just so wonderful. I would say with the shimmer particles of this ink, I didn't get it as much as I thought I would in writing. It is so incredibly subtle, and that is one thing that I have noticed a lot with Dominant Industry inks is that their shimmers tend to be a little bit more reduced in a way, like muted, but not to where like it's not showing. It's just very subtle is probably the best word I can come up with. And the last pen that I had inked up for January is my newest one. So I debated on doing an unboxing for you guys for this, but I decided against it. Let me know if you still want me to do like a pen comparison or something. I'd be happy to. But this is the new Benu from Goulet Pens. It is the Earl Grey tea, and I had to get it because it has a transparency to it. And it's tea. I mean, yeah. Apparently, when they made them, they have little flecks of tea inside of the pen in the resin, and I was head over heels and picked one up. I decided to get a medium nib of the Benu since I have a fine nib and love the fine so much, and I have to say the medium is no exception. I decided to ink this one up with Birmingham Penco's Polar Bear, which is one of my newer inks as of the end of last year. And I really wanted to see how the ink would behave in a medium nib since I've been testing them out in my various pens. And I have to say, this is number one for me. This was so fantastic to write with. This is what the bottle of Polar Bear ink looks like from the Birmingham Pen Company. You can see it's the Keystone formula. I absolutely have been head over heels with these inks. And as I said, this pen and ink combination was my number one for this month. This was so fantastic to write with. Polar Bear is this beautiful, like, icy cerulean blue color. It has a red sheen to it, but the sheen is not shiny. It's like halo-y in a way. It's very muted and matte. I love it. It is so beautiful. The medium nib of the Benu Euphoria did a fantastic job showcasing all of the shading with little bits of sheen around some of the letters. I was so in love with this combination. I also loved seeing how the blue almost matched perfectly to the little blue flecks in the pen itself. I don't typically match my pens and inks together, but I was really happy with this combination for sure. This will definitely be a re-inking experience sometime in the future, but I definitely enjoyed it this month, probably more than I should have. I almost wrote it completely dry before I made this video, and it's not even halfway through the month. And like I have been doing with most of my currently inked videos, I wanted to share the naming of the color scheme that I wanted to do for this month. And I picked a muted rainbow of colors in a way because I wanted this month to reflect more on self-care. And that's actually the theme that I decided to name it, was self-care. I chose this because January is usually a time when people are pushing and hustling and getting back into the grind, and you know, it's the new year, new me, and you're trying to do all of these things in the first month to set yourself up for success. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I think it's really healthy to have those goals and aspirations and just work towards something. But January is also the dead of winter for me. It is when it's freezing cold outside, when everything slows down in nature. And I prefer to live more in a seasonal way than just with the hustle and bustle of society. And so for me, January is more about taking time to reflect on myself and see where things are going. Yes, I'm still going to set up all of my planners. Yes, I'm still going to be making all of my goals and intentions for the new year, but I'm not going to rush myself into anything. I'm going to take things slow. I'm going to assess where I am, and I'm going to have some self-care. I'm going to take a few days off if I need a few days off. So with the naming of self-care being self-care, rainbows typically make me feel really well, and I wanted to do something a little bit softer than a bold rainbow, and I feel like the colors I chose fit really well for that for me. So in final review, this is what my January currently inked looks like. I'm excited to experiment with doing this for the next few months to see how I like this kind of layout. But so far, I'm really happy with this. I'm also really happy with how the new Sans and Paper is holding up to ink swatches because there's almost no bleed through, which I was really happy to see. If you are interested in the rest of the currently inked videos that I will have for 2024, I made a brand new playlist to dedicate to all of my 2024 pen and ink combinations. So I will have that in the description, and I will try to keep that in all of these videos in the future months to come. I would love to hear your feedback about my pen and ink choices. If you have any questions, if you have any inks you would recommend, if you have a different naming you would have given this. I've always loved to see what you guys come up with, the creativity you have, and it just inspires me to make these videos more and more often. But as for me, I am very happy with my first set of pen and ink combinations for the opening of 2024, and I'm really excited to see what I come up with for the rest of the year. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, for joining me here today, for spending a few moments of bliss in my fountain pen and ink hobby time. And yeah, again, thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.